patient advocacy at Obesity Action. Meet my co-host, Rachel Atkins.
Hi, everyone. I'm the Director of Strategy with Obesity Action.
Obesity Action is a nonprofit organization for people living with obesity or elevated weight. It was formed by patient advocates whose focus is to provide evidence-based education and advocate for public policy and environmental changes that will enable well-being. If we can do that, we are one step closer to the acceptance and inclusion of millions of people in larger bodies. Obesity Action is bringing together a community of seekers, hoping to find a solution aimed at healing the mind, body, and spirit. Together, we'll create a community of enlightened and connected people who nourish, love, and accept their bodies. The Eat, Play, Love Spotlight series runs weekly interactive events with experts. So the first half of the episode is the interview, and then we're going to turn the spotlight on you, the audience, to address your questions and comments in a safe and supportive environment. These events are brought to you by Obesity Action and our collaborators, 905, who are here with us today. So the Raptors 905 who are here with us today, and A&A Clinical Research. In this episode, Every Move Counts, we talk to the Raptors 905 head strength and conditioning coach, Graeme Campbell, and the assistant coach, Ryan Schmidt. I hope I said that right. So let's start by having both of you introduce yourselves to the audience. We'll start with Graeme and then we'll move on to Ryan. So what motivated you to get involved in basketball growing up? Was this your aspiration, your goal? What got you into this field?
Okay, so hey everybody, hope everybody can hear me okay. My name is Graeme Campbell. I'm originally from Montreal, Quebec. I live in Toronto, Ontario. Been there for several years. Growing up was kind of just always involved in sports, played a lot outside. Didn't really, we didn't have a smartphone still at that point, or maybe just on the cusp of it. So wasn't totally distracted by video games growing up or, social media. So yeah, a lot of time outside, my siblings and friends, and kind of just, I played all kinds of sports, but, basketball was the main sport that I played. And then it just kind of ended up being, a sort of fortuitous, lucky scenario where I ended up, going into sports medicine, athletic therapy, strength conditioning, and ended up getting involved with the Raptors 905 organization and just ended up working with them, just kind of by luck, applied through a connection, and I've been there for 3 years. This is my third year with the team. Yeah.
Wow. A time before smartphones and spending time outside. That sounds like magic. Let's move over to you, Ryan. What inspired you to get into this?
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Nice to see everybody. So I think, basketball's always been a big part of my life. I grew up playing as long as I can remember. Like I was pretty young when I picked up a basketball at a young age, and it was something I just had a passion for and pursued. Played in high school, played in college, and then I played a little bit professionally before kind of having some injuries that kind of shut that down. And I never thought I would actually get into the coaching side of it, even kind of going through all my playing stuff. But it ended up kind of coming along when I was kind of at a crossroads of, do I continue playing or pursuing playing professionally, or do I kind of move on with, what comes next in life? And we had a family friend of ours actually back. So I'm originally from Portland, Oregon. So out on the West Coast, I see a lot of Vancouver people on the call. And so we actually had a family friend back there who was kind of running like a youth academy, and asked if I'd be interested in kind of helping out while I was trying to figure out what the next step is. And long story short, I fell in love with coaching and the teaching element of it, and decided I want to kind of make it a professional career, and pursued it. And lo and behold, I ended up here. This is my fourth season with the Raptors 905, and yeah, it's been fun.
Wow. I like how both of you describe it as you kind of just fell into it, or what was luck, or maybe it was just, always meant to be this way, right? When you're open to what is possible. So I'm going to ask you, Graeme, when we think about coaches, we often think about somebody who really drives like discipline and working out and pushing your body to the 10th degree. But what does mindset have to do with coaching?
Well, mindset is basically, it has everything to do with coaching. It's incredibly important. Doesn't matter the type of athlete that you're working with, the individual that you're working with. The kind of coaching style that you describe, I think that's, a stereotype of coaches. And those type of coaches definitely exist. Those type of strength coaches and sports coaches absolutely exist, but there's a continuum. There's all different types. And I think understanding mindset and the mindset of your athletes and how you cultivate, a successful mindset in the individuals that you work with is, that's the most important thing, whether you're a disciplinarian or whether you're, a motivator, or whether you're sort of like one of those coaches that tries to be friendly or friends with the people that they work with. Mindset is hugely important, right? That's how you ultimately drive the individual to change or succeed, as opposed to just, forcing them to.
Yeah. So I think you bring up a great point. So Ryan, when we think about, these different coaching styles, do you change your coaching style according to the player and trying to tap into what would motivate them to change their mindset?
Yeah, I think the best coaches are able to adapt to the personnel or the people they're working with. And I think you see, kind of that old school mentality sometimes is talked about when you kind of refer to like the disciplinarian. I think there was a certain way that coaches thought that they had to do things for a long time. In my time in coaching, and some of the best coaches that I've been around in all different fields, whether that's the sport itself, like basketball or different football or strength conditioning, life coaching, like I think I've always seen like the best ones are able to adapt who they're working with. And I think some people you can be a little bit more, strict with and a little bit more of a disciplinarian. And other people you have to there's a process that it kind of takes to kind of where you have to help them, understand kind of where you're trying to go, where you're trying to help them with. But, to Graham's point, I agree. I think mindset has everything to do with coaching.
Yeah, and it probably has just so much to do with our motivation to move our body to begin with, right? I'm not sure, maybe there's a small number of people that are listening today that maybe aspire to be part of Raptors 905. But, for the rest of us, even regardless of what it is that you're aspiring to do in life, why is being active and exercising so important for us?
Go back to me on that one?
Ryan or Graeme, either can answer.
I think that, being active, it spills over into, every part of our lives. It doesn't matter, what your focus is or what your lifestyle is. There's pretty much nothing that, leading some sort of active lifestyle can't help with, right? I mean, there's so much research coming out, or established research, that we know how much that just like even small amounts of activity help the brain, right? And so if you're somebody who cares about, your cognitive performance long-term, then being active is probably one of the best ways to help that in the long run. But I think, it comes down to ultimately like, what kind of lifestyle do you live, and what are the things that you enjoy? And how can you fit activity into that, right? Because I think, nobody wants to get up and do something that they hate, right? But how can you figure out how to be active around the things that you like?
Yeah, that's a good one. Ryan, you probably, I don't know what your view is on this, but you probably have lots of people that say, oh my gosh, you're so active. You're around so many people that are active. What would you say to someone that maybe is not active all the time and they're looking for some kind of inspiration?
Yeah, I think when you're looking for inspiration, I'm a big believer. I think you have to start small. I think, sometimes like when people start doing things, they try to, bite off too much. And I think that's where so one thing it's kind of a pet peeve of mine is, and I try to kind of help people, is the whole New Year's Eve resolution, the New Year's resolution, where people always set on January 1st, they want to start and they want to do all this. And it's tough because, how many times I'm guilty of it too, where we set, like you want to do something in the year 2021 and I think it so many times you see people fail at that because one, you're setting a goal that I think you need to start small. And I think again, like how can you kind of start to, implement habits and, if being active is something you want to do, then can you go for a walk, to the end of your driveway and back every day for 2 weeks? And I think to me, that's something that's really important is just instead of setting this like large goal that a lot of times are going to be unattainable, like, start small and then start building from there.
Oh, that's a really good point. You know, a lot of times, you know, when we think about, you know, oh, I want to be active. Okay, on, you know, on New Year's Day, then I'm really going to change up how I do things. And we also have this idea that, you know, when we need to work hard, right? There's that concept of no pain, no gain. But, you know, that was a really good, you know, tip that you threw out, Ryan. Just kind of start small. So Graeme, are there other things, you know, other tips, maybe kind of like ways that we can start small if we want to be more active?
I think that setting goals and holding yourself accountable, even if it's very small goals, is helpful, right? Like write things down. You know, I totally agree with Ryan that, you know, sometimes it's just, you know, start with very, you know, attainable, easy things, and then progress them over time. But writing them down, it really helps. Like write goals for yourself. So you're, you know, if let's say you just want to get outside more, and you're like, I want to spend a little bit more time outside. Well, it's like, okay, well, you know, write that down. Maybe I want to spend, you know, 3 hours a week in the sun outside. And so you hold yourself to that. You write it down. You kind of look at your schedule on a weekly basis and say, okay, maybe like, you know, this is the weather forecast. I'm going to go out, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, or something like that. But just if you, a lot of times when you just kind of think of things, it's very hard to action them over time. You know, like Ryan said, it's easy at the beginning, but when you have something to refer back to, whether it's writing it down, you write it on a calendar, you know, set yourself some goals that you can see. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, so I have a question for both of you. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and during COVID, especially when school was in lockdown, it's like a challenge to keep them active. Now, pre-COVID, it wasn't a problem because she had all these activities and she had all these sports that she did, and of course, all of that shut down. And then it's just me and mommy, her and myself at home. Trying to figure out. And I would often, and I'm a firm believer, if I want her to do it, I have to do it. So I'd be like, we're going for a walk now. She's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, we're going for our walk now. She's like, no, I'm not. So how do we motivate our kids to stay active? Both of you. So who wants to go first? Ryan, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to being a parent, so kudos to you. I've heard a lot of stories about during COVID how difficult it has been. I believe in the same thing you kind of just, you know, talked about. I think as far as you can be a part of what, you know, you're doing, and I can speak personally for myself, and I won't speak for Graeme, but I've seen him do it. I think the thing that him and I both enjoy doing with athletes and people we work with is, you know, I'm gonna do it with you. I'm not just gonna tell you that you have to go out and do these things, because I don't believe in that. So I think, yeah, if you're able to be involved, make it fun. Because also you get the interaction, and I think it, you know, a lot of times too, it kind of distracts from the working out type thing. If you can kind of do it with a friend and make it into a game or something fun where they enjoy it, and so they're not just thinking that they're going for a long walk, or whether it's running or whatever the activity may be. I think, yeah, if you can participate and try to, you know, throw something in there to where you can make it a little bit more fun and enticing for them.
Yeah. How about you, Graeme?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ryan on a lot of those points. I also am not a parent yet, but, you know, for my friends that have kids right now, you know, I'm hugely empathetic to everybody, because I know it's been extremely tough over the last years. I have very close friends who have very young kids, and yeah, I know it's a challenge, but I think, you know, like you said, you know, find ways to do it together. And I know, again, that kind of puts the burden on the parents, and that's tough. You know, unfortunately, this is a difficult year that we're all in, and I think, you know, it's hugely important to try and make it fun. You know, for kids, most of the activity that they do, it shouldn't be performance oriented. It shouldn't be like, you know, hardline goal oriented. Maybe they're like playing rec sports as kids, and that you can kind of work towards small goals and stuff like that. But, you know, 99% of it should just be based around fun. So how can you make it fun for them to get active? And when you're stuck inside, you know, it's hard. So, you know, get outside as much as you can. You know, with what the, you know, sort of jurisdictions allow, especially now it's getting nice outside again, that you can kind of get out there. But that's it. You got to make it fun somehow. You know.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And so trying to make it fun for her just recently cost me $300, because I had to get her a brand new bike that she's super excited about riding. And so now we can go on our, as soon as it warms up a little bit more, we'll be out on our daily walks. Changing the channel a little bit and talking about a more serious topic. Children and youth of today are obsessed with body image. right? So it's the Instagram reels, what we see on social media, the things that we really glorify, that is leading to eating disorders, bullying, and mental health issues. First of all, do you see that at all in your coaching experiences? And second of all, how can we create a supportive environment? We'll start with Graeme.
I mean, we do see it in the coaching environment. Most of the athletes that we work with are under 25, so their, smartphone culture is just ingrained in them. And when we finish a game, a lot of the time, guys go back to the locker room, and especially if it's a loss, they'll just sit there on their phones and look at stats from other players, and see the highlight reels from other guys. Social comparison on social media is just like a massive problem, for everybody. Anybody who's engaged in social media or like really wrap their head around that stuff. It's inevitable. So it's an extremely difficult thing to navigate. And I understand that for kids, obviously, you don't necessarily have the mental fortitude or the self-awareness to be able to sort of remove yourself from that, because we all can do it. But at least, if you have some self-awareness, you're older, you can kind of check yourself and say, you realize what you're doing is unhealthy. But kids, they don't really have the ability to do that. Yeah, I mean, it is extremely hard. I don't know if there's necessarily a good answer to it. I think if kids are really young, if you can try and restrict how much social media they're on, or try and restrict how much, how young they are before they get phones and stuff like that. But again, not necessarily practical. For me, I think the most helpful thing is just to have them have like a really good group of friends.
Yeah.
Again, that's not necessarily controllable either, but I think that was something that always helped me growing up. Was I had really good friends basically my entire life, and people I could surround myself with that were positive influences, had good families, and that was always helpful, because you just you have people there to lift you up, even if they don't know that they're doing it. Just like again, going outside and having fun with them kind of distracts you from keeping your head in a screen all day. But I don't necessarily have a good answer for it. It's tough.
It's tough, yeah. Ryan, have you seen a lot of that? A lot of comparisons with the highlight reels of people's social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in this social comparison in every walk of life, I think now, because of the world we're living in, and, for us as coaches, you're constantly kind of, maybe not battling is the right word, but you're constantly trying to monitor and, help guys out with understanding that, you're in your own fight, and you can't compare yourself to, say another guy who, for us, like a big thing for our guys is, trying to get called up to the NBA. And, they see other guys that have done it, and they think that, well, they're doing this, and now I have to do this. And maybe that's outside of their role, but they want to change because they think that's the answer to the test, basically. And so I think you're constantly fighting that. But I think for me, again, I don't have the right answer. So I think just the other thing too, I think is just, conversation. And Graeme said, group of friends, and like, your inner circle, whether that's your family, it's your friends. Like for us, it's within our staff and our team. How can you help these guys? Because I think a lot of times we just assume, that these guys, they know and that they have the answers. But when they're constantly kind of comparing themselves to others that they're seeing through social media or through conversations, I think that at times it becomes tough. And so to have those conversations, them to kind of understand like where they're at with things, how you can help them out. Because I think that's probably the toughest thing. Is I think we get into seasons, and we get into whether it's family members or friends, and we always just kind of assume that they know based on a conversation we might have had a month ago, and time may have gone by so long to where maybe it's time to revisit some things, and kind of just bring them back to where they're at, and kind of refocus on what they need to do.
So if I were in, sure, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing. I think, like, especially when you're younger, I think this is an uphill battle, but just reminding people all the time that this is not real life that you're seeing most of the time, right? This is not your life that you're living in a screen. Like, your life is out here somewhere, and the things that you see there, most of the time, that's not real life.
It's all good lighting and good camera skills.
And filters, and and people only post like the most positive things about their life, right? Nobody posts anything that is negative. So I don't know how you ingrain that message, but reinforcing the fact that like your real life is your family, friends, people around you, what you're doing with your active time. But stuff in the screen, that's all a mirage.
Yeah, that's such a good word, mirage. So tell me, if I was in the locker room after a loss, what would the conversation sound like?
Quiet.
Quiet. Oh, there's no conversation.
It's this now. It's literally just you're just staring at your phone.
Oh,
Yeah, guys. And this is not something that I mean, Ryan can speak to this. He's been around a little longer than I have, but I don't think this was an issue, 10 years ago. But now,
right.
ever since I've been there, as soon as a game's done, especially in a loss, guys go back, they sit in their locker rooms, they go on their phones, they don't talk to each other.
So as coaches, do you try to start the conversation? Do you have words of encouragement for them?
Not necessarily right after. I think at this, at our level, you're dealing with professionals that, and Graeme made a good point. Like there's the reality kicks in a lot when you see, these guys after the game, they're right back on their phones. And sometimes it's social media. There are other times they're replying to their agent of, because it's very, like, it comes back to like their career. And again, going back, and it might be checking social media to find out what other people are saying about them, both negative or positive. And just, you're kind of, you're fighting that. As soon as the game's over with, they go back and they pick up their device, and it's just it's a cycle. But for us, I think, it's kind of it's like an unspoken rule, I guess, to where after losses, we kind of just leave the guys alone. You don't want to speak too much on emotion, because that's, as coaches, you're frustrated with when you lose games as well, and that competitive nature of ours that we all have. But so I think a lot of times what we've done, and I like it, is you kind of, don't react to it. Just kind of bring it in real quick, say a couple things, and we move on. And then after that, like once guys have showered and changed, we're leaving.
Yeah.
For me as a coach, that's when individual conversations start happening. Whether it's, if we're on the road and guys go back to the room, I'll maybe send some text messages, jump on a call, maybe go grab dinner with them. But like right after a game, like it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, that's actually really great advice, even for parents, right? Your kids come home, they're upset, they've had a big loss. Maybe it's not the time to try to pep talk, but just let them kind of lick their wounds, let them have their time, and then come back at a later time and talk about it. So that's some great advice. Over to you, Rachel.
Yeah, I found in listening through, what you were both saying as well, that's very much applicable for me. And I think for a lot of the folks that are listening today about, surrounding yourself with the right people and all those kinds of things. So I was just thinking, we talked a lot about like kind of the state, of your mind. And then certainly, because of a loss, then you're kind of feeling down. But even for yourselves, both you, Ryan and Graeme, like what's your motto, or what's a piece of advice that you come back to that helps bring you out of that and lift you up? And, maybe that, something that we can all take on that's inspirational for all of us to be more active and to kind of move on when things don't go so well. So Graeme, do you want to start?
I think for me, especially as things don't go well, and this is kind of something that I've always felt, in my mind, I like the slogan that if you're not going to be thinking about it or remembering it in 5 years, don't dwell on it over 5 minutes. Like I'm very quick to sort of move on from things. As soon as you kind of get wrapped up emotionally, from a bad experience, as soon as you snap yourself out of that, I try and just drop it and move on, because, you have to ask yourself, does this stuff matter, tomorrow, a week from now, 2 weeks from now? And is there something that we can learn from it, right? That's the important thing, is like, when you make a mistake or something doesn't go well, what can you learn from it? And then just move on, right? But like Ryan said, I really agree. Like people will have that time to emotionally kind of decompress or process things. And you have to give people the space for that. For myself, give me space, let me process whatever I need to process. And after that, have a conversation, move on. That's usually where my headspace goes.
Yeah, that's so good. Ryan, how about you? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty kind of the same message. I think there was a coach that I heard a long time ago, and I was still playing actually, that said, never get too high on a win and never too low on a loss. And I think just kind of the message in there, just, you have to stay even keeled, and, life, sports, everything, it's a roller coaster. And I think, you're going to have days where things don't go well, and, you're just having a bad day, and then there's going to be days that are great. And I think no matter what, you have to try to kind of stay as even keeled as possible, and just know that whatever that day or whatever that moment is doesn't define, who you are or what your life is about. So kind of like to Graeme's point, if you're not going to remember it 5 years from now, then there's no use in dwelling on it. But I think there's a trying to find that balance. And I think, we've all been through things in our life, and sports is such a great metaphor for things. And it's been a huge lesson or a huge way of growth in my own life, because I've gone through a lot of ups and downs. And I think as you go through those at a young age to where you get older and you're now in a position like we are where you're coaching guys, you know, you can kind of use your experiences to help people out and to talk through it. But as far as motto goes, that's something I'll always remember.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, and you're right. I think like the experiences that you guys are having within the sports world are definitely translatable, you know, across everywhere and everyone. So, you know, with that in mind, if you had a magic wand and you could change the world, you know, what would that look like? Graeme?
I think if you know, I've heard about this a lot, and this kind of applies a little bit more to the States than Canada, but it's very prevalent in Canada as well. Is to have a medical model that's focused more on, you know, preventing the causes of illness and disease than treating, because our medical model is very based on you show up at your doctor's office with symptoms of something, and you try and fix it from the back end. And I don't think that our medical system does enough to emphasize all the things that we can do to prevent things, because there's so many ways that, you know, there's so many different facets of living a healthy lifestyle, and they're not necessarily complicated, and they're all cumulative. You know, you can think of just small things of like going for a walk every week, you know, in the morning, waking up, enjoying a cup of coffee, focusing on your breathing for 5 minutes, just little things to get your head right, to get your body right. And it doesn't have to be, you know, complicated workout programs and, you know, fancy diets. But I don't think the medical model that we have emphasizes that enough, and I would flip that.
I love that. I think that I see you having a really big voice in this space. So I hope you push this forward. Ryan, what about you? What would your magic wand do?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely double down with what he said. I think that's the biggest thing that we deal with in coaching is you're always trying to figure out how to fix problems and like how do you prevent them. And, you know, more so like on Graham's side, like, you know, injury prevention. Like everyone knows like if you have a serious injury, like you're gonna have surgery and there's a rehab process that follows. But how do you prevent those injuries from happening? And it's the same thing too. And I think the other thing for me on this point, what is a big frustration of mine is, you know, it's money in the sense of like where you see all these fast food companies and these people putting out all this junk food that's not good for people, but yet they're pumping out advertisements and billboards and trying to get people to you know, consume these things that we know aren't good for our bodies. And I think to me that's probably the most frustrating thing is you're constantly, and that's something that Graeme and I fight constantly with our players is trying to get them to understand, yes, well, you can't go to McDonald's. You can't put that kind of stuff in your body and expect to perform at a high level. But again, like we've all been there, like as you try to change your habits and those things, but then it's so funny to me because anytime you turn on the TV or you're in an airport and you see like all the advertisements, it's all stuff that's not good for you. And it's just, it's money being made for these companies. And it's a frustration of mine.
Yeah, mine as well. Yeah.
I'm going to go back and just piggyback a little bit off of that. Like, I think that a lot of people probably don't have, you know, understand the concept of the fact that a lot of the athletes that we work with, they're, you know, incredible athletes. And they're obviously, you know, their bodies are pretty amazing in what they can do, but these are not people who necessarily have healthy habits. You know, they don't sleep very well. A lot of them do not eat the things that are going to help them to succeed. And, you know, I was listening to a lecture the other day, you know, physiology lecture, and they were just discussing how it's dangerous for the body to try and build performance on an unhealthy system.
Wow.
So if somebody has very unhealthy habits, but you're trying to, you know, get them to rev performance, you know, really hard, you know, get them faster, stronger, play harder, more minutes. It's just dangerous for the person. And I think a lot of the injuries that we see, you know, overuse injuries, and even, you know, some traumatic injuries, you know, you can draw the link back to the fact that they have, you know, their lifestyles don't add up to the way that they want to use their bodies. And it's like Ryan said, it's a huge struggle for us because we have a lot of young athletes like right out of college, who were kind of used to always being given sort of like given their daily schedule, given their daily meals, given all this stuff. And then they come to us and they have no sort of self-sufficiency and they just order fast food all the time, stay up all night playing video games. And then we get on a plane and play a game the next day and they got to play 35 minutes. It's tough.
Wow. And I always thought they had youth on their side, but I guess not. We can all suffer from unhealthy habits. Yeah. Youth doesn't matter. So our final question, Obesity Action is a new organization, and we are about building a community and helping this community that struggle with maybe elevated weight or obesity. So do you have any advice for us? We'll start with Ryan and then we'll end with Graeme.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is really cool. And I think just having this dialogue and conversation is helpful. And I think it kind of gives a platform and an area for people to go to seek advice or help, or just to get some things off their chest, what they're struggling with. So I think one is, this is awesome to see. Two, advice, like I'm a big believer in, like I kind of talked about earlier, as far as starting small. I think sometimes when we set out goals that are too big, sometimes they become unattainable. Now, with that being said, I agree with Graeme, where I think it's important to have smaller goals to where you're trying to accomplish things, but I think more so focus on the process of how you want to get there. And it's kind of setting up a system. If you want to, if it's losing weight, or if you want to, participate in a marathon or half marathon, it's like, okay, how do I get there? Instead of saying like, hey, in 9 months, I want to run a marathon. And I've heard a lot of people say this, well, what are the steps it's going to take to get there? And then commit to those steps. And obviously the first step becomes, and then the second step. Because I think the hardest thing where I've seen a lot of people get frustrated with is when those goals aren't accomplished, we kind of look at ourselves as failures, and that's not the case. And so it's just a kind of a psychological thing too that you're battling. So if you can kind of more so focus on a process and kind of implement a system with how you want to get to where you want to get to, a lot more times you're going to see success happen. So, but no, that's it for me. I think what you guys are doing is awesome.
Thank you. Over to you, Graeme.
Yeah, to echo Ryan, really appreciate the organization that you guys are trying to put out there. I think for me, especially if you're talking about like kids, you got to find activities that you enjoy doing, things that you find fun, activities that either alone or with people that help keep you active, but that again, that you want to do. Like, a sustainable lifestyle isn't about like trying to do something all the time that you don't like. So again, I think, if you're a parent, try and expose your kids to a lot of different things, and they'll find something that they like, right? I think, let's go do this one day. Let's go do it. Kids will pick up on what they like and what they don't like. And when you find something that you like, you're more likely to stick with it. So if a kid likes gardening, right? That gets you outside, it's active, whatever. That's cool. Do that. If it's team sports and it gets you in a social environment, that's really important too. But, for me, finding those things that you like to do just through trial and error, sometimes it takes a while, but I think that there's, healthy lifestyles that fit into, all of our interests. Sometimes we just got to find what those are.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just letting kids find what they enjoy. And I've done that with my daughter, and we've taken lessons and let them go, and taken lessons and let them go. And some stick and have stuck for years. And that's way better than trying to force her to do something I think is appropriate. So thank you both. We're going to now open the floor for audience questions. We will prioritize live questions versus chat box questions. We encourage you to turn on your camera when you're ready to ask a question, introduce yourself, and let us know where you're tuning in from. You can raise your hand virtually, and the way that you do that is you hit the participant button, which is at the bottom middle of your screen, and then you'll be able to easily find your name, and there's 3 dots beside your name, and you just click on that. You can raise your hand virtually. Otherwise, you can just turn on your camera and raise your hand. We'll be scanning for raised hands as well. But at this time, the floor is open, and Diane, you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I can't come on camera. I'm sorry. I'm on a loaner computer. And
No
I'm having some
problem.
challenges.
Where are you calling? Where are you
I'm
tuning
calling
in
from Hamilton.
Nice.
This is for the guys. The ladies have such body images, negative ones. You look in social media, you look in magazines, you look on television, and even the models don't look like the models look. Is this the same for the guys? Are they getting unrealistic body images too, or is this just the ladies that are getting it? And what are they doing about it? Are they having issues with it too?
I'll jump in that. I'm not in any way an expert in this, but 100% it happens to guys too. 100%. I can't remember the term for it, but there's like sort of a body dysmorphia that's the opposite for what it used to be for women, which was, trying to look smaller. For men, it's trying to look bigger, right? More muscular, more lean, but at the same time bigger. And it's a huge issue for guys growing up as well in high school. I can remember lots of kids in high school getting bullied for being like really skinny, and these kids go and see, maybe not so much anymore, but it was like when I was in high school, like Muscle and Fitness magazine and Men's Health and all this stuff. And, the sort of archetype for, male aspirations is like Aquaman and Thor. And look at these guys, like those are very difficult bodies to achieve as well. So I think it absolutely goes both ways. It just cuts a little differently.
Yeah. Graeme, did you, anybody, did you want to add anything else, or should we move on to the next?
I thought that was well said. I agree with him 100%.
Okay. Shaleen, is that how you say your name? Do you want to lower your hand?
Shelley?
Shelly, sorry, Shelly.
That's okay.
Hi, Shelly.
I put this in the chat, but I'm limited in mobility due to a leg injury. How do you get that physical activity in when swimming pools are closed due to COVID? What can I do?
Graeme, you want to take this one?
Sure. Again, challenging situation, like you said, with pools closed, and a lot of the time, physical therapy offices operating on sort of limited availability. This is I'm sure, a very difficult situation to be in. Sometimes it takes, the right tools, and it's hard to get those tools when you have limited mobility. Again, I don't necessarily have a good answer for it, but I think seeking out an individual who is specialized to work with individuals with physical disabilities or mobility issues, the right type of physical therapist, they are the people who are really good at helping in situations like that. So I think, seeking help where you need it is probably the best bet.
Okay.
And I work with some clients who have very similar issues to you, and they use an online resource. I think it's the Arthritis Association of Canada. And even though that my client doesn't have arthritis, she really likes that site because they have a ton of exercises and exercise videos that are seated, that are for people who don't have a lot of mobility due to arthritis, and she raves about it. I haven't been on the site, but that's really easy and accessible from home to get onto the website and watch. Yeah.
I think there's definitely really good resources out there. You just got to find them, but there's tons of stuff out there, individuals and like you're saying, Sandra, stuff online that you can find.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. We'll take Nick, and then we'll move to the chat box. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey guys, I'm Nick calling from Toronto. Great to hear from you guys today. It's been great listening to you guys speak. Just had a quick question about, maybe you could talk about the relationship between exercise and nutrition and food. I know you touched on it a bit before, but I've read some articles or some things out there suggesting that it doesn't really matter how much you exercise if your diet is poor. I mean, you could be on your Peloton all day, but it doesn't really matter if you have some unhealthy habits. So can you guys maybe speak to how nutrition plays a role in exercise and how important that is?
Yeah, I think Graeme and we kind of attested to it earlier, where I think that's kind of one of the biggest struggles that we have with our players as far as helping them understand what they're trying to do. And Graeme made a good point where you watch these guys play and they're freaks. I mean, some of the things that these guys can do, it's unbelievable, and it's fascinating. But then you'll sit around and you'll see them throw stuff in their body that you're just like, you got to play in 24 hours again. It's like, it's not going to help the recovery process. So yeah, I think it's a very, very, very important topic, and just try to find that correlation between, I think that's kind of a misconception that a lot of people think is, well, I'm working out. And I've heard, we have coaches, we have players, I'm working out so I can go eat this. And that's not the case. I think what you're trying to accomplish with your, physical, health, and also your mental health and well-being, is trying to get those things to align, because I think it's a misconception of I work out so I can put this into my body, and it's not just players, it's all of us that, you know, at times have done it and thought it. But I think it's hard, but at the same time, like the quicker and the more understanding you can be to get to that point, I think the more beneficial it's going to be, because I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that we can have.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan completely. I think you want to try and make those things align as much as possible, you know, both the nutrition aspect and, you know, the physical activity aspect, because it's all just kind of part of a healthy lifestyle, right? You don't want to just sort of pick and choose, I'm going to do this one healthy thing and whatever. It has to be sustainable though. You know, nobody has to be perfect. And we try and teach this to our players. It's like, you know, we're not telling you to eat the perfect diet for you to recover between games and improve your athletic performance. We're like, but you can do a little bit better than you're doing. You know, and the last thing I'll say is I just want to split the line. I think a lot of people, at least in my industry, you'll hear a lot, you can't out exercise a bad diet. But I think that really maybe only applies to sort of body composition, because exercise has so many benefits outside of simply like losing weight, that even if you eat poorly, exercising is still really important, and you get a lot of benefits from physical activity. You know, like I was alluding to earlier, brain benefits, circulatory benefits. There's all kinds of things that even if you're like, you know, maybe you're somebody who doesn't have a great diet and doesn't exercise a lot, well, just exercising more is going to help your longevity. It's going to help your, you know, your long-term health. So it is important. I wouldn't say you has to be one or the other, but like Ryan said, over time, you want those things to align, especially if you have, you know, performance goals.
Thank you. We're going to go over to Rosie and check if there's anything in the chat box in terms of questions.
Thanks, Sandra. Yes, there's been lots of activity in the chat box. We have a question from Corrine, and Corrine is wondering, what is the difference between coaching an individual as compared to a team? Is there a teaching component to coaching?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think, yeah, that's a great question. I think when you're coaching an individual, it's very more personal and intimate, I think. And then when you're coaching a team, like you're still trying to obtain a goal, but you're trying to bring a group of people along to obtain a goal together. And then sometimes that's difficult because along that journey, sometimes you're going to have individuals that kind of straggle off to you, because I think at any point, you know, and I'll speak just to a basketball side first, but you know, anytime you start a season, the ultimate goal is to win a championship at the end of the year. And as you kind of go through, you know, a month to month basis, you know, individual needs become the center of attention for those specific people. And so you've got to kind of get them back in to kind of get focused on the goal at whole. And then individually, yeah, you've got an individual goal to where you take a player, for instance, and like a lot of guys that we've coached, their goal is they're always kind of thinking of like what's next. And that's just kind of the environment that we're in the G League. And so trying to get them, you're trying to help them with what they need individually to get to where their goals are. But at the same time, you want to now, how can we do it within the realm of the team? So there's a lot of like similarities in how you're going about it. But I think the best way to coach a team is also still not forget about the individual. And again, I think that's where you see the best teams and coaches that are able to do both, where you're kind of helping the individual and coaching them along, but also at the same time bringing the team, you know, to where they want to go.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Graeme?
No, that was great. I mean, I agree with everything that Ryan said.
Rosie, do you have another question from the chat box?
Yes, this is from Diane Campbell. Diane says, there are times people say, I have pain in my knees, and we always tell them, if you have pain, check with your doctor first, if you are allowed to do that activity. Any thoughts on how we can take the conversation from there to encourage them? I'm not quite sure what Diane means by encouraging them. So Diane, do you want to just clarify your question if you're comfortable?
She asked the question. Did she not ask the question?
Oh, is it the same Diane that asked the question?
Hi, this is
That wasn't me that asked it.
It was Diane.
Oh, it was.
No.
Okay, we've already answered her question.
No, it wasn't me that answered that question. Asked that question.
Oh, it's not.
So, hi, can you hear me?
Sabina's waiting. Sabina's waiting.
Oh, okay. Well, do we want to address this chat box question before we move on to Sabina?
Yes, it's a different question than from before.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Diane, did you want to clarify, or should we try to guess? It sounded, yeah.
I think it's Giselle that says, and I might be saying that name wrong. I apologize.
No problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Gazelle from Toronto, registered dietitian. And thank you for the great conversation. It was perfect. I just wanted to ask this question. I do get that all the time, that people have pain in their knees, in their shoulder. And when you come up with exercise topic, I feel like I don't know where to go from that point. Like I have pain, I can't do it. And, you know, like as a dietitian, we're not highly trained on where to go from that point on, except for the guidelines that we know. If there's any, you know, barrier there, then I don't know what to say, especially now with all these issues that we have, everywhere is closed. I feel like I'm not able to carry the conversation from that point on. When they say, like, when I do this, after 5 minutes, I get pain in my shoulder. And we were told if they get pain, they should really stop that particular activity and talk to the doctor to see whether they're allowed to continue or not. So what do I do from that point on?
I think, you know, you have to distinguish, and this is not your job or necessarily the patient's job, but you have to distinguish between, you know, what is it that you want to do? And is the pain something that's, you know, it's a new pain, you don't know what it is, or it's like, hey, I have that ache in my knee that always happens when I do this, but I like doing this, you know, and I'm, you know, do you have to be worried about it? And I think, like, you know, how you're saying you have to refer to doctors. Number one, I would say don't refer to doctors for basic sort of joint pain, you know, things that don't seem serious. Obviously, anything that seems like a medical issue, send them to the doctor. But I would say a lot of times people go to a doctor for, you know, musculoskeletal, you know, small things, ache in your knee, ache in your shoulder. And the doctor's not necessarily equipped to handle that. You know, the physical therapist is the person who's really going to help you. And the doctors may be, you know, prescribe you pain medication, and they'll probably just refer you to a physical therapist anyway. So I usually tell people, if it's not serious, if it seems like something minor, go to your physical therapist first, you know, or your athletic therapist, or, you know, sports medicine practitioner. They're the people who are specialized to help you with that. And then I guess, again, you can kind of steer the conversation in the direction of, you know, is this something that you are familiar with? You know, your knee's hurt for X number of years, you know, it's a thing. And is it something that an activity that you really want to do? And if so, you know, can you find a way to work around sort of the limits of that pain? Because we have athletes all the time that play through aches and pains. You know, it's very common. It's just because they love it and it's their job, you know, they do it. For general population, I think it becomes a little different. But, you know, kind of referring back to Shelley's question before, there's always something that you can do. Everyone can always do something. And often you have to work around certain things, but it doesn't mean like, oh, I can't do anything because, you know, my ankle hurts every time I walk. Well, there's always something you can do. And it's just about kind of seeking out those resources.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Sabina. You have your hand up. Please unmute yourself. Let us know where you're tuning in from.
Okay, so I did type the question in, but my question to both of you is, how do you manage to stay motivated every single day? And how do you motivate the other players? And for me, I find it easy to start something, but to stay motivated and maintain the discipline, I find that difficult. So how do you all keep others motivated as well as yourselves?
Yeah, I think, you know, in order to help people get motivated, I think, you know, you have to understand, you know, where, again, kind of going back to that goals thing and like the habits and the process I was talking about earlier. I think just having a clear understanding of what you want out of something. And, you know, are you working out as a performance based, or you want to do something, you know, like I said, like I use the marathon, or some people swimming, or whatever the case would be, or if it's weight loss, or if it's just like I want to live a healthier lifestyle. You know, what is the end kind of goal that you're going after? And then I think, again, in order to stay, you know, I like to talk about it being inspired more than motivated. I think motivation is short term. And I think it falls off at times. So I think with being inspired to do these things, a lot of it's just going to come down to, you know, what your daily habits consist of. And instead of, again, the goal portion of it is tough, because I've seen so many people that when they don't obtain that goal, it's like an automatic failure occurred, right? And I know I talked about it earlier, but I think going back to that same thing is just, again, in order to stay motivated, to stay inspired, it's knowing what the end, you know, the goal is to have in sight, and then continue to just, it's just a day by day. And I know it sounds cliche, and I don't want it to sound that way, but you know, again, what are you doing tomorrow to help you get to where you want? And then again, in the next day. And then over time, like those become habits, and you start to kind of become used to that. And instead of it being a motivation, then it becomes part of your daily activity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything to add, Graeme?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. I mean, absolutely what Ryan just said. And then also bring it back to kind of a theme of what I've mentioned a couple of times is what do you enjoy doing, right? Because if it's either you're either working towards something that you want to do, and maybe you don't necessarily enjoy the process so much, but there's an end goal, like, you know, I want to be able to run up and down the hill with my grandkids. Well, maybe you don't necessarily enjoy doing physical activity to do that, but you're going to enjoy the end goal. So reminding yourself of what the purpose is that you're doing it for, or again, finding something that you enjoy doing. And there's always new things that you can try. So if it's, you want to go to the gym and just stay active and you get on the treadmill and you hate it, don't do that, because it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. I'm too old to do stuff I don't like doing. Like that's my motto now. And I have to be doing things that I enjoy to keep that consistency up. Stephen, can you please unmute yourself? Let us know where you're calling in from. Good to see you, Stephen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen from Malaysia. So it's great to see you again. Today I'm quite messed up, so I won't on my video. So my question is that there are many children and adults with obesity now. They look up to sportsmen like yourself. They want to look bulked up and lean, sort of idealizing certain body shape as healthy. So what do you think as a sportsman like yourself and others that we all can do to reduce this type of weight bias? Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to start, Graeme? That's a great question.
Sure. Again, this is not necessarily my area of expertise. I don't have great advice on this. I absolutely recognize the problem. I'm very familiar with, the issue that you're talking about. In terms of solutions, kind of speaking to what we've mentioned before, but again, I'll go back to, having a good group of people around you, family, friends, people that can reinforce the positive things in your life that are not these sort of external, sort of empty images, whether you're seeing it in social media or on, TV or, wherever. It's just having positive people around you in your life that are going to reinforce, things that you value in yourself outside of these sort of external drivers, right? Because there's lots of things that everybody has, like sort of attributes that they value in themselves, and it's reminding people what those are, right? And 99% of the time it's not looking like Aquaman.
Thanks. Ryan, did you have anything to add?
No, I agree with that. That's that's not an area of expertise for me either, but I agree with what you said.
Thank you. Rosie, back to the chat box.
Great, thank you. We have a question from David Arsenault, and David asks, do you feel our physical education programs in Canada are doing a good job to get children on the right path of health and physical activity? And the second part of the question is, what are your thoughts on the physical literacy movement?
I'll jump in this. I actually read that question in the chat room, and I love this question. This is such a great question. This is such a great issue. We do not teach kids physical literacy or how to move their bodies, control their bodies the way we do, cognitive subjects like, math, science, all these things. And it's equally as important. You're living in your body your entire life, and being able to sustain that body in a healthy way, move through, fundamental kind of human movements that are going to help you do activities of daily living, whether it's play sports or, pick up groceries or anything. We don't teach kids that stuff. So yeah, there is like, a sports and a fun and a play component to physical education in Canada, which is important. But I think that to David's point, there has to be, or there should be more of an emphasis on, actually coaching movements to kids. How do you jump and land? What are, good running mechanics? What are good, sort of changing direction mechanics, sort of like basic things that we do in athletics and for sports. But this stuff applies, how do you move through your body? How do you move through your hips, your knees, your ankles in a safe way? you know, this isn't about like picking up a barbell and moving weights. This is just about how do you control your body, you know, whether you're playing, whether you're doing a sport, whether you're doing activities of daily living. And, you know, gym, quote unquote, in Canada, I mean, it might be different now than when I was there. I don't know if it is, but, you know, we could spend way more of an emphasis on this, you know, especially breaking up the day into different components of like, you don't just have an hour of gym, you know, you have multiple sessions of being active and going out in the day and learning how to move your body and having fun while doing it. So I know there's sort of these different models and there's a lot of good thinking coming out of this area. Hopefully policy changes it, but I think it's really important.
Rosie, we'll take one more from the chat box.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question from Sonia Radcliffe. How do you coach motivation physically and mentally? So two-parter. How do you coach motivation from a physical perspective, and how do you coach it from a mental perspective?
Yeah, I think coaching motivation is it's knowing and understanding where the person wants to go. You know, I think that's the biggest thing too. Is I think so many times, like if you know what they're looking for, and I think again, coaches, like I think the best coaches have there's a personal relationship there to where you can understand. And to also that point, I think you can kind of push a little bit harder because you know through conversations and not just saying, hey, what are your goals? What do you want of this? It's deeper conversations over time as you're kind of helping them with the process. And then, you know, then you have something to kind of go back on. And that's always something like with, you know, players that I work with, one of the biggest things all the time I always like is, you know, what are you trying to get? It's like, what are your goals, you know, for being here in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 years, whatever they are. But once I understand that, and then I see that their habits don't match their goals, like I got them right there, you know. So it's just kind of where you can always have something to go back on. It's like, hey, you told me that you wanted to do this, and yes, at some point things are going to get a little difficult, and those are the moments that we got to kind of push through. So I think, you know, having a clear understanding of what they want, where they're trying to go, and then and also the accountability piece, I think is really big.
Thank you. We'll take one last question from Shelly. You have your hand up.
Sorry, Sandra, I just want to go back to something real quick. So somebody said in the chat room, they asked, what is physical literacy? Sorry, I should have defined that. I don't know if this is the exact definition, but to me, physical literacy is just, you know, in the way that you would learn to read or write, you learn to move your body, you know, in a safe and effective way that's going to set you up for long-term, how to take care of yourself, how to move through life, you know. You can think of it, there's several sort of fundamental movements, but you can think of like, how do you bend at the waist? How do you bend at the knee? How do you move your shoulders? You know, rotate your spine, stuff like this. Sort of simple stuff that people end up learning in physical therapy, you know, years later, but you can teach this to kids in a fun way.
So great. Shelly, do you want to close this out for today?
Sure. How do you encourage, convince, motivate? You can pick any one of those words. The youth of today that are going through puberty to continue to be active?
Yeah, so I know you guys have alluded a lot to this about, you know, doing activities that are fun, but I think, you know, what about that very specific time when people are going through puberty and hormones are crazy? I'm not looking forward to that with my own daughter. Do you have any words of advice, Graeme?
Again, not necessarily my area of expertise. I've definitely worked with kids in that age range. I don't know how to necessarily speak to how to specifically motivate kids going through that or teenagers going through that. You know, one thing that we see a lot is, it's funny, you get a lot of these, you know, boys and girls that will come into train going through puberty, and they've gone through a growth spurt. So they're very like tight, like you can't, their bones grow faster than their muscles, typically. So it takes a while for the muscles to catch up and adapt to that length. And these kids, like, you know, it's like they're moving like giraffes, right? They're just very stiff, and but it's just being like accepting of that and not trying to, in my experience, working with those people, not trying to say, okay, you have to move this certain way, but just saying like, hey, be patient, and maybe we're going to modify things for, you know, a couple months while your body kind of gets used to being all of a sudden 10 inches taller. But in terms of a motivational piece, I think, again, you just keep it fun. Competition is great. Some people are not competitive, but competition is a great way to keep things fun for a lot of people. You know, you make training or sport competitive even within like a team setting. Like Ryan can speak to this, but we do a lot of like within team competition stuff, just to keep a fun aspect to it.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna close our session today. We offer our sincere thanks to Graeme and Ryan for generously giving up your time today. My biggest takeaway came from Ryan when you talked about not getting caught up with the highs and not getting too low with the lows. And that's, I think, great advice for anyone. Rachel?
As always, I have two. So Graeme talked about writing it down, and I love that idea of writing down that I'm going to be active, you know, on certain days based on weather. The other thing, it came from Ryan, and it's the idea of tapping into your inspiration over your motivation, because motivation is limited, but inspiration is infinite.
Yeah, great. So get involved as a member of Obesity Action Community. Please visit our website at obesityaction.ca. We'll be sending out a survey and would appreciate you completing it so we can continue to build programs that are recommended by you, our community. So be sure to tune in next week for Healthy Habits Suck. Our guest is Dr. Dana Lee Bagley, and it will be on Thursday, March 25th at noon. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.